Nation, Guru Nation, Guru Nation, Guru Nation. Guru Nation, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share. It really means a lot to me. We're going through an SOP today. And I really am thankful for Guru Nation for pointing this out to me, that on one of my recent podcasts, we did not have, I got into like source and regulatory, but we never got into SOPs. And what that means to have like an SOP and what it means for sites and coordinators. And one of the first things you do when you get hired at a site is you learn the site's policies. So what does SOP mean? Standard operating procedures. This is the most important thing a site has to have. Here's the thing about SOPs, standard operating procedures. They are auditable. You are held accountable for what's in your SOP. Now, GCP, which is good clinical practice, supersedes your SOPs. The protocol itself from the study should supersede your SOPs. If there's a discrepancy, you should follow the protocol. But you're going to have to revise your SOPs because the sponsor wouldn't let you do the protocol if they knew what your SOPs were, like in contradiction to the protocol. Doesn't happen often, but it does. And then it's the SOPs. So, by the way, SOPs, standard operating procedures, are a work in progress. So, like, they're never done. I'm always adding to it. I think when I first started, this is my SOP. It's been revised so many times from my first site back in 2006. They've been rewritten. I think I only had like 20 sections. Now I'm at 61. As of January 23, we're at 61 sections. I'm actually pulling it up in my Creo right here. So we actually keep revising this like every couple of months. Actually, I said 61. We have 62, actually. My bad. So in January of this year, we had 61. By May of last year, we had 62. So about every 3-4 months, I do revise them, usually based on like a sponsor request or technology changes. Like, quite honestly, the last 1/3 of this SOP is from like changes due to our eSource and our eReg systems. So let's get into it without wasting any more time. The first section of the SOP is the introduction. The site SOP was created as an additional supplement to study protocols for the research site. It serves the purpose of providing further details for duties and procedures and elaborates on all the expected functions of the PI staff coordinator. It's a work in progress. So the first section just gives an introduction of what the SOP actually is. Section 2 defines what a study coordinator is at my site, Yuma Clinical Trials, and general duties. So here's a first sentence. A study coordinator is an individual with expertise in clinical research trial management, typically the CRC. It could be a number of things. Could be a nurse, a medical assistant, a foreign doctor, or other individual with equivalent scientific clinical background and research experience. The requirements for hiring a study coordinator are that the individual should have a bachelor's degree. However, it is also possible to be promoted to study coordinator from research assistant. And at my site, Yuma Clinical Trials, that's actually most of the people don't have bachelor's degree. I think half of the coordinators do, the other half don't. So this section, it's good that I'm actually doing this video and going through it. I probably need to revise that section again because, like I said, this is a very important point to drive home. The FDA, if they audit you, they hold you accountable to your SOP. So because I wrote in that section, and this is back in my California days where you get more bachelor's degree employees, they might say, well, why are half of your staff not bachelor's degree? And I do have that little sentence in there that covers me, but I would just make it a little more clear. just so I don't get in trouble in case I get audited. So I'm probably going to revise this. Section 3, initial sponsor contact. What do you do when a sponsor reaches out to you? Investigators are provided with clinical trial opportunities through several sources, including pharma companies directly, CROs, SMOs. Sponsors may call or email. So I get into what a CDA is, how we handle that. The agreement is signed by the PI and maybe a member of the management team. I probably got to change that too, because our CDAs now are just signed by a coordinator. So it's actually really good I'm going through this, because I'm going to revise some of these sections. Section 4 gets into research contract. So contract and budgets. And by the way, you can have your sections labeled in any order you want, whatever you want. This is just what made sense for me at the time, and it's a working document that we're continuing excuse me, continuing to grow, but I'm going to go through and make a lot of revisions to this as well. So the research contract, I talk about that in section 4. I talk about all contracts should receive legal review. Study coordinator is in charge of regulatory files. Section 5 is the research budget. So we talk about the importance of uh, making sure that the study site is the payee, which we do that, and then who's going to sign off on it. Section 6, I get into site selection visits and how we handle it. So the site selection visit is critical. Um, Once investigator and management team express an interest in a study, the sponsor will do a site selection visit. So commonly requested information is CVs of the staff, licenses, disclosure. It kind of gets into what a site selection visit is and who should be there or attempt to be there. So the last paragraph of that is, if a site selection visit has been scheduled, the coordinator, PI, and management team should be familiar with the protocol. Once the monitor arrives, he or she should see that the coordinator and PI are prepared. So it's more about how we should handle this visit at our site. Section 7 is about institutional review boards. So to date, our site has only worked with central IRBs. My phone's about to drop, Daniel. Ooh. Central IRBs, and should continue to do so whenever possible. So this is where we get into like local IRBs versus central IRBs and the differences between the two. We use only central IRBs, so that's the thing with our particular site. But with other sites, they might use local IRBs, so they're gonna have like this at academic medical center is gonna be an insane section, because this is going to be like their specific policy for their local IRB, which might be pages long. In my site, this is only one page, and we work with whatever central IRB the sponsor wants us to work with. Section 8 is good clinical practice. All study procedures must be conducted in accordance with GCP. All study coordinators must be trained in GCP, which we do. Section 9 is about OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration. Employee safety is of major importance. Our goal is to constantly provide a safe and enjoyable workspace. Our medical providers have OSHA regulations on display for all employees to review. So if your site doesn't do this, don't put it in there. Okay, this is like important. Like, we do this, we have it in there. You don't want this in there, and if you don't actually do it, then the sponsor or an auditor is going to say, what are you actually doing? Section 10 is clinical operations. Each protocol requires slightly different clinical procedures, varying from specific individual procedures to a particular order of performing the procedures. Uh, Another thing I want to emphasize here, if you're creating your SOPs, is to make them vague so that you're not held to like a specific way of doing things, to give you freedom when you actually operate, to give you more freedom. And this one, I basically say we're following the protocol. So it kind of gets us off the hook. Like, another universal procedure for most protocols is vitals. Vital signs are calibrated yearly. The devices are calibrated. Blood pressure, obtaining blood samples. We just get into like just very basic what we do at most visits, and that we follow the documentation principles: attributable, legible, contemporaneous, original, accurate, complete. Section 11 is a big one. You're often asked for this one a lot. And again, it's not really the order of these things, but the informed consent process at your site. You're often asked for this particular section of the SOP. So I just took the general requirements for informed consent process um, at that the FDA wants, and I put it in the SOP that we have. But you can write your own. There are various forms to be reviewed during this process. I used to have California Bill of Rights when my site was in California. Now I don't have that. We're in Arizona, so I took that part out. Again, always make sure your SOP actually makes sense for what you're doing, but the informed consent SOP is really important. Number 12 is source documents. So this is where I probably need to revise it again because we're using Creo, and we do get into sections later on in this SOP where we are talking about eSource and the like. But in this section, I get into what a source document is, how it's recorded, how everything eventually needs to make its way into a case report form. So this includes everything from medical records to progress notes to just all kinds of things. Source documents should be filled out according to ALCOAC principles, and I actually have that in here as well, so that's good. Section 13 is case report forms, EDC, how we enter the data. This is a process that's actually changing. Like technology is changing this particular process on a yearly basis. I just talked to a startup that has a really cool, innovative approach to data entry and fixing the case report form process. So when we eventually implement that, if we do, this part of the SOP will have to be revised. But for now, it's here the way it is. Honestly, the more technology your site uses, the more you got to revise your SOPs to make sure it's making sense for the processes that you have. Section 14 is scheduling patients. So when scheduling patients, the coordinator should ensure the patient visit occurs in the proper window as per protocol. We use Creo to help schedule now. We use CTMS systems. I do have that in there because we revised it as we changed. Section 15, I have like how to utilize research assistants. So who's assisting the coordinators? I have a paragraph on that. Section 16 is about regulatory, how we keep the essential documents, the 1572, the protocols, the amendments, what kind of investigator site file do we use, whether it's electronic or paper, doesn't matter. We have a process for that. Section 17 is laboratory, good laboratory practices. We follow the lab manual. Section 18 is about investigational product. How do you store it? How do you track the temperature? We have continuous temperature review with the automated temp sticks that check like every hour the temperature and has the min max for the day. What to do if IP expires or if the investigational product goes through a temperature excursion. What do you actually do? Section 19 is about how do you obtain patient medical records, and it's authorization to release medical records form. It's also Creo now has a way to do this as well, so I probably have to revise this section also. Section 20 is about patient recruitment. How do we recruit patients? What sources do we use? Do we use from the community? Do we use patient databases? Do we use electronic health records from our PI? Whatever you do at your site, you got to put it in there. Section 21 is reviewing the protocol. How do you train your staff on the protocol? What is your guys' actual process, especially from a quality assurance perspective? Section 22 is about serious adverse events. And adverse events, how often do you report them? When do you report them? It should be 24 hours upon the site knowing about the SAE. Section 23 is about investigator meetings. So when you need to go to the investigator meeting, how you should conduct yourself, what they're about. Section 24 is about ratings and raters/assessments. We do have uh, psychiatric trials, so this is unique to psychiatric sites. But because we do psychiatric trials, I put this section in here. Who's a rater? What do they do? How do they get trained? Section 25 is about patient reimbursement. I have like 2 sentences here about it. Patients may receive a stipend for their time and travel as per the negotiated budget of a particular protocol. These payment stipends do not need to be documented in subject source, but they do need to be distributed as per ICF. And the reason I wrote that is because that's exactly how we do it. Section 26 is about reimbursing drivers for their time. This should probably be eliminated from this SOP, honestly, because we don't really use drivers that often, and when we do, it's Uber. So for the most part, patients come in themselves. But because we do have drivers occasionally, it's you can argue you can still keep it in here. Section 27 is how to deal with monitoring visits. So during a trial, how often do you expect them? Who's supposed to greet the monitor? What you're supposed to do? Section 28 is about working with the finance department. So how do you use funds to pay patients, to get snacks, to get dry ice, to get supplies? It's a paragraph on that. Section 29 is working with human resources. So any grievances, any overtime, vacation, those kind of things, it's a paragraph. We put it in here. Section 30 is about closeout visits. So how we handle closeout visits. Section 31 is about archiving and study archiving. Now, Creo does the archiving for you in the cloud. We used to have to actually physically send our documents to Iron Mountain or store them on site, but we can still do both. And we do have paper, even though we use eSource and eReg, we still do have some paper. So we do archive hard copies of things at the site. Section 32 is about audits. So what a sponsor audit is, what a CRO audit is, what a FDA audit is, how you handle these things, who's going to be there to handle the audit. Section 33 is about site confidentiality, who has access to HIPAA, who has access to patient records, all these kind of things. Section 34 is about patient safety. Patients should never be left unattended for longer than a few minutes in an exam room by themselves. A patient should wait in the waiting room until called. This is the procedure for your site and how you want to handle it, but you probably should have something on that. I have one on employee safety, which is training. If your employees are going to start doing phlebotomy, how you document their training for phlebotomy. Section 36 is about ongoing training and documentation. So how the study team members are continuously do their training, whether it's IATA, GCP, SOP, NIH protecting human subjects, or whatever other training programs you have at your site. Section 37 is about the destruction of investigational product. Some studies require destruction of the IP. In these cases, we utilize a particular vendor for destruction of investigational product. Section 38 is about medical emergencies. So, what happens if there's a medical emergency uh, with a patient at the site? What do you do? Section 39 is about controlled substances. So if you ever do studies with controlled substances, this is a very important section. Section 40 is about blinding. How do you keep your staff blinded when you need a blinded staff and an unblinded staff? This is maybe 6 bullet points. Section 41 is about lab kit destruction. So after a closeout visit, and here towards the end, these are all requests I've gotten from sponsors like, hey, do you have a SOP for lab kit destruction? And the first time they asked me, and I said no, but I can make one. So I made one really quick, and it's basically a paragraph. Section 42 is biological sample storage and retention. Section 43 is transporting blood samples and supplies. So if you're drawing blood from one location, but you have to bring it to another, how you do that. Section 44 is about transporting patients. If you ever need to drive a patient from one place to another, how do you do that? Section 45, electronic systems access and confidentiality. This is where it starts getting into the e-stuff, the e-source, the e-reg. Section 46, we have a whole SOP on COVID or other similar pandemic temporary procedures. So we do have like, hey, how do we handle patient visits? How do we handle monitoring visits in case of a pandemic? Section 47, certified copies of medical records. How do you ensure that the electronic medical records are certified? It's usually the PI has to sign them. Principal investigator signing and dating them. Section 48, electronic source and e-reg. And this is where I got this from CREO. CREO gives the sites these things. So section 48 is about what e-source and e-reg we use. So I put CREO in here. I also put Viva in here because we do use Viva sometimes. Section 49 is about the disaster emergency procedures. So in the event of an earthquake, a flood, a fire, what attempts do you go through to get the data, the study materials? It's about a paragraph I have here. Section 50 is about CAPA plans and deviations. What happens if you have a deviation? This one's important. Maybe I'll read the first paragraph. While site will make every attempt not to commit deviations, these are actually common occurrences. Occasionally, site may inadvertently commit a deviation that jeopardizes patient safety. If sponsor requests, we will trigger a corrective action, preventative action plan. We also do it sometimes even if sponsor doesn't request it. Section 51 is system setup and installation and system operating manual. So this is specifically about CREO and how we set up CREO for each study. And CREO provided us the wording for this. Section 53, the data collection and handling for eSource. Again, CREO gave us this. Section 54, data collection and handling for e-regulatory. CREO gave us this. Section 55, data archiving. CREO gave us this. 57, security measures. CREO is 21, Part 11 compliant. Section 58, data backup recovery and contingency plans. This is all from CREO. Section 59, user training. We train staff on how to use CREO and all the systems we use, and we document it. Section 60, roles and responsibilities of sponsors and trial sites with respect to CREO. And the last two, study validation and SOP for use of CREO e-consent. I'm pretty sure if I were to do this video again a year from now, we're going to have like 10 more sections because these tech vendors keep adding up. But that's my SOP, section by section for you guys. Again, keep it vague. They are auditable. The FDA will audit. The first thing they ask for is your SOP. You need to make sure you're following your SOP. So you want to keep it vague enough to where it gives you freedom, but also strict enough to where they are happy with your SOP. So hopefully that helps, guys. SOPs, standard operating procedures. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Catch y'all later. Bye-bye. That's a wrap. Hey, if you guys like that kind of content, make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share. Stay tuned for more videos.